Let's bring in David Drucker now, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, and Chris Wilson, Republican pollster who's worked for the state GOP in Texas, also worked, of course, on Senator Ted Cruz's 2016 campaign. Mr. Wilson, I'll start with you here in the studio because it would seem as if Republicans have found their foil in this particular story. The whistleblower, we heard the president there at the rally last night. I also was struck by what we heard from Senator Rand Paul as well. Take a listen to what Senator Paul said.
Hunter Biden made $50,000 a month. That's the definition of corruption. We know he got it only because of his family connections. We also now know the name of the whistleblower. I say tonight to the media, do your job and print his name.
Someone who's worked on crafting a message. Is that the best rallying cry going forward for Republicans?
Well, I think it depends. It is, there sort of a cognitive dissonance here to some extent. I think there are reasons that whistleblowers are protected, but it is not as if you can go out and make charges without being able to address if you can be under charges without being able to address your accuser. And I would point out that a rival network showed up at a grandmother's house and put her on national television because she did something so nefarious as put a meme on Facebook. And this woman suffered death threats. So let's face it, it's not as if there's this massive protection that's existed for a long time for people who do things publicly that bring attention on themselves.
But you're not saying you're opposed to whistleblower protections.
Am I opposed to whistleblower protections? No, I'm not. But okay. I think at some point, whenever the motivations become exposed to the whistleblower and the charges start to crumble, which is what it looks like is occurring here, it becomes a little bit less. Of a reasonable question that this person stay anonymous.
Which charges appear to be crumbling?
Well, I think if the transcript comes forward, as you just said, and the report pointed out before, if transcripts come out, that is what the Trump administration has wanted from the beginning. They felt like when the transcript is released, is that people will read it for what it is, which is advice that came from his advisors and him taking action on it. And let's face it, when it gets down to it, it is about an investigation that never took place and about funding that was never withheld. And so that is a little bit difficult to get to an impeachable offense out of.
But you don't dispute the idea that just because someone tries to commit a crime and isn't successful in committing that crime, that doesn't negate the fact.
No, but I dispute that there was an attempt to commit a crime here. I think that is far from proven, and I think to even make those sort of assumptions that a crime attempt to be committed here that's going too far in terms of the process where it exists right now.
So, based on what we know, you don't see anything wrong with the phone call.
With the phone, based on what we know today, I think it is too early to say that, yes, there was something done with a phone call. And there's a big difference between whether or not something wrong was done and whether or not it's an impeachable offense. I mean, if there was a quid pro quo, I mean, how is that different in some extent from Democrat candidates for president saying, well, we withhold funding from Israel if they don't withdraw from the West Bank? That is a quid pro quo. And so if the president was saying, I want investigation into corruption before we give you money, that's one thing. If it was saying, I want investigation of a political rival and we will definitely withhold money, that's something entirely different. And where does that line cross? And I think that's where we're still waiting to find out.
David, the released transcripts that we do have so far do give us a bit of a peek behind the curtain at how Republicans are going to question the witnesses, or how they have been questioning witnesses in these behind closed door sessions. This is the Washington Post. This is the summary from the Post. Quote, Republicans have used their time to complain that testimony has become public, going after their colleagues who are quoted in media reports, commenting on witness appearances, and quizzing witnesses themselves on how their statements had been released. The Post also highlights this particular exchange between Congressman Mark Meadows and the president's former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who also goes by the name Masha. He asked about the origins of her nickname, Masha, asking, where did you get that name from? Well, despite my posting to Ukraine, I'm actually half Russian, and it's a Russian nickname, said Yovanovitch. Meadows then abruptly completed his round of questioning. I yield back, he said. That's an exchange that apparently happened in the closed-door hearing room. So, David, Republicans have complained for weeks about the interview process. They stormed the secure area of the Hill where these interviews were happening. Based on your reporting, do they have a strategy for questioning these witnesses when they have the chance to do it?
Well, they have a strategy. Some of it, they complain, has been shut down by the Democrats who control the process. And I think what Republicans are trying to do, whether or not it works, is, one, poke holes in the credibility of the witnesses. They also want to introduce information that they believe puts Ukraine in a negative light in terms of whether or not, according to Republicans, they interfered in the 2016 election on behalf of Hillary Clinton. This is something that the president believes. This is something that people close to him, like Rudy Giuliani, believe. And I really think they want to inject that into the bloodstream. Ultimately, though, I don't know that all of that is going to matter. I think what's going to matter is whether, as all of this testimony is made public and we have transcripts, whether or not there is new information that paints a more positive picture of the president, his behavior, what he did, and how people inside felt about it, or whether it helps bolster the Democrats' case that the president abused his power. I don't really think, when you're looking at impeachment, although it's helpful if there's an actual crime, I think what Democrats are trying to do here is say that the president abused his power. And what's interesting, Craig, is that everybody agrees on the summary transcript of the call with Zelensky, but everybody disagrees over what it means and what exactly the president did, whether it was wrong or not. So everybody's fighting over something where they agree on the facts at hand, but there are differences of opinion over whether those facts are bad for the president or good for the president.
Meanwhile, David Drucker, were you at all struck by Senator Rand Paul last night? I mean, it seems as if it was just yesterday that Senator Paul was one of the other senators who took the president to task from time to time for a variety of things, and now he's hosting rallies for him.
Right. Well, it's been a while since Rand Paul and Donald Trump were at each other's throats. Rand Paul has been pretty tight with the president for a long time. He sees in the president somebody who believes in his non-interventionist approach to U.S. foreign policy, his hesitancy to project American power abroad. So Rand Paul has tried to cultivate that. And, you know, I understand why some Republicans are frustrated that the whistleblower's name has not been reported. This is something that we have been trying to report at the Washington Examiner, but there's a difference between knowing something and being able to confirm it. And with something like the whistleblower, you have to be able to confirm it. And I don't think the media is laying off this so much. When you look at the only story to have reported this name, there was no confirmation. There was a great story about this individual's career, but there was no actual reported confirmation. It was just sort of reported as fact. I don't necessarily doubt that that story was wrong, but we are actually trying to confirm it, and that's something that can be difficult to do, but that's what journalism is.
So the Washington Examiner has the name of the whistleblower. They're just working to confirm it?
We're working on this story is all I will tell you. Okay. There is no shying away or covering up because, like any media entity in Washington, we want to report news, but we have to be able to confirm news.
Meanwhile, Chris, NBC News has confirmed that Lev Parnas is prepared to work with impeachment investigators now after previously refusing to do that. You may remember Parnas, of course, and his connection to Rudy Giuliani. He was arrested last month on campaign violations. His lawyer explained his change of heart to the New York Times by saying this in part, quote, Mr. Parnas was very upset by President Trump's plainly false statement that he did not know him. What kind of threat do you suppose that Lev Parnas might pose?
That's the ultimate in butthurt, isn't it? It's somebody says they don't know me. He seems like, I feel like I'm watching an NBC crime drama, and he seems like kind of the low-level criminal that always flips at the end, that you know it's going to happen. But I suspect in terms of what he has to say or do, I doubt there's anything there, and if there is anything there, it's probably just a bad day for Rudy Giuliani and not much more than that.
Chris Wilson, David Drucker, thank you both. Jury